On today's show, 10 years since Giannis was drafted. So, of course, we thought naturally we should spend a whole off-season podcast talking about Giannis, some of the memories from years gone by, and potentially what we expect moving forward from him. I think if you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan or you have been for a long period of time, it has been by far the most entertained you have ever been, unless perhaps you're really going back there, which we have to respect. So lots of Giannis chat today. It should be fun, and we're looking forward to having your involvement as well. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN. And alongside me from the Bucks Radio Network, and someone that has been doing some serious heavy lifting for this podcast over the last month while I've been traveling, Justin Garcia. Look, Giannis. Frank might be disappointed to not be on the Giannis podcast here, Justin, but I think that we'll be hearing from Frank a lot. But it is great to have this conversation with you, because if we do this podcast with Frank, it might go for 3 straight days. So we're going to get into lots of fun stuff today about Giannis, and we appreciate everyone jumping on board and listening or watching wherever you do so. We appreciate it. If you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe or drop a like or drop a comment on your favorite Giannis memories, then do so today, because it is a big week for the podcast free agency about to roll in. And we are going to, as the week moves on, continue to talk about some of these rumors. Even if we believe that nothing is going to happen, there's some names that we need to discuss, and we're going to do that on the next show. But today, it's all about Giannis. We appreciate the support of everyone watching or listening. As I said, 10 years goes by pretty quickly, Justin.
10 years. Yeah. When you first mentioned doing something on the anniversary of today, I assumed you meant the 12-year anniversary of the CM Punk pipe bomb. But then I remembered it was also the day that Giannis was drafted. I saw our old pal, Ted Davis, had tweeted out earlier today as well his memories of that night and being at the Cousins Center for the draft. I was there as well. And I'm not going to profess to have known a whole lot about Giannis, other than he was the intriguing Greek prospect that all the footage that you could find of him, I think the big question was, he looks great, but it also looks like he is a college student playing middle schoolers here. But I was still in favor of it at the time. Easy to say now, look how great it's turned out. But my big thing, and I think a lot of Bucks fans were pretty much aligned on this, was, look, this was a franchise that, maybe too tough to say, was headed nowhere, but they really, didn't have that clear path. And it's teams like that you just have to try and win the lottery like they did with Giannis. I didn't envision it working out like it did. But if for no other reason than, hey, this guy might develop into, I think we all initially hoped, an all-star was the ceiling, it made a whole lot of sense. And it's been that and then some.
Even just watching the draft clips, there's a few things that stand out to me. Firstly, the fact that he was in the stands, and you don't see that a lot for first rounders. Yeah, even the other night as we sat there and watched the draft, there's occasional guys there, but oftentimes they're in the second round. Even last year, Hugo Basson was the last pick in the draft, and he was up there in the stands. And given that he waited so long, I was very happy that he got his name called, but you just don't see it a lot. So that was the first aspect. And we sort of know the story now. He came over to the US. He was hoping that something was going to work out. And I'm not sure where pick 15 fell in that, but you're right. The Bucks were in a situation where they had to take a swing, or really there was nothing to lose at that point in time. The second thing that was interesting was the immediate reaction from Fran Fraschilla, who, by the way, I think it holds up pretty well. Now, the one thing that he did say is that, can you put him in an NBA game right now? Probably not. But I think if you're a Bucks fan, you've got to be excited about the long-term prospects of Giannis, which, again, if I think back to watching that draft, that was enough to get me a little bit excited. Even the highlights that we saw in that draft package, you were intrigued by something that was super unique and you hadn't really seen before. And there was a lot of talk about Kevin Durant, which was purely based on the size. And I think Giannis obviously had a lot of respect for Kevin Durant. But even the highlights we saw on draft night, there was nothing really that compared to KD, but it was slashing to the basket. It was taking the ball full court, as then, by the way, a guy that was like 6'9".
Yeah, they mentioned Kevin Durant as a lot, and it was body type Kevin Durant, which as we've seen too, that comp, maybe with the height and the length it held initially, but that comp has been shattered as well. And after Giannis has just continued to develop his body and the way that he looks. But yeah, those highlights, what really jumped out most to me was some of those highlights in the package when he was drafted, his playmaking ability. And, Jason Kidd gets the credit for really developing Point Giannis and putting the ball in his hands. I do remember when he was drafted thinking, well, he's comfortable handling the basketball, but it still kind of felt like a revelation when he was basically your point guard for that year or two under Jason Kidd. And seeing those highlights, it just brought that back of, oh, that's right. I didn't remember just how skilled, granted against lesser competition, but just how skilled he was as a ball handler and facilitating and running the offense.
And so I think one of the big benefits that Giannis got, and part of it was clearly his attitude and his work ethic that we all saw. And even though it was a very baby-faced Giannis, we saw it from very, very early in his career that he had that competitive nature that I think all Bucks fans have grown to love. But even if you look at his stats from his rookie season, he played 77 games and 25 minutes per game, started in 23 games. And so the Bucks were probably kind of fortunate that they were such a rabble at that time, that he was just playing every single night. Because, again, we have seen the way that he works and the way that he tries to develop his game. Like, would he have got to a level regardless? Probably. But we've also read and heard about the struggles that he had living away from home, and probably playing so much was helpful for that. And so as I look back at it, I'm thankful that the Bucks stunk so bad that Giannis was able to play every single night and give us the flashes on this 15-win team that was just absolutely awful to watch. But I know that I was tuning in every single night to just see one corner three from Giannis or one block or one dunk. He was the reason to watch this team during that season.
And the G League has certainly changed things, and the Bucks not having an affiliate at the time that they drafted Giannis, because it wasn't until, 2018, I think, that the Herd came to be. So that wasn't a thing where you could say to Fran Fraschilla's point, can you play him in an NBA game right now? Probably not.
Did the Bucks have an NBA roster? Maybe not.
Right. And that's the thing, where with that team and where they were that season, that it was just like, well, who cares? Just let him learn here. With no G League affiliate as well, I wonder how different that would have been if you had the Herd, and if the Bucks were even a 30-win team that season, and you could say, well, maybe we can sneak in and get the 8 seed. Let's just play him with the Herd. It's the sliding doors theory of how all of these things could have been different here. And it's kind of a larger discussion over, the Bucks haven't had a talent like Giannis, obviously, in terms of their young players and draft picks to develop since Giannis, but we've seen some guys that haven't really caught on, or maybe it's taken a little bit longer, and there's been a lot of stop and start. A number of things have gone into that. Playing time is one of them, but also when you're a team that's competing, it's tough to carve out that playing time. And if you're of the mindset of just let him get out there and play against top level competition, the highest caliber of competition at the NBA you can see, that's what will develop you rapidly, or more rapidly. If you're of that mindset, Giannis is the number one test case for you in that look.
And to your point, we've seen the Bucks try Thon Maker. Maybe not to this extreme, but some guys like DJ Wilson that were sort of athletic prospects, and how can they develop? But I think that firstly, in that first year with Larry Drew, and he played him a lot, and then you've already spoken about the connection with Jason Kidd. But the one thing that I've always said, even with Mike Budenholzer over the last few years, it takes someone pretty ridiculously special like Giannis to actually continue to push through that and fight and develop at the rate he has. And we spoke about that rookie season where he actually shot a decent percentage from three, but it was on very low volume. But the next year to double the points, the next year to be most improved, and then the next year after that, have one of his 7 All-Star selections as well. So I think just the rate of rapid improvement is something that I feel like it's unlike anything I've seen before. And that's why, as we'll probably talk to at the end of this show, you ask what is next for Giannis, and maybe now it's more from a team perspective than just the individual, but we've gotten so used to seeing this guy take a step within every 12 months.
Yeah, because it was the first 6 years where it was all of the major statistical, the back of the basketball card, all of those stats improved year after year after year. That this was really the first year where we didn't really see any market improvement in any of those categories. And that's not a shot at Giannis. It just speaks to his growth and his evolution the first 6 or 7 or 8 years in the league. But I should point out as well, when you mentioned the memories of draft night and some of the things that stood out, you did not mention yet, at least, the number one thing that, as we've come to know, is true to form. And that's when Giannis's name is called, the hype man sitting right next to him, who is the most excited and gets the Greek flag up there waving it, a young Thanasis that we see from the early days, Thanasis laying the groundwork for that guy with the energy off the bench.
Yep, and that's worked out pretty well, I think, for the Bucks as well. When you talk about the back end of their roster and the things that those guys have been able to do, and really the whole family, how they've seemingly found a home in Milwaukee as well. So some of the great memories, and clearly there are some that are right at the very top for Bucks fans, particularly in the last few years. But I'm curious to know what comes to mind for you over the career of Giannis so far in Milwaukee in these last 10 years. So we'll get to that next after we talk about our friends over at eBay Motors, because for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors with eBay Guaranteed Fit. You can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you'll get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, the right prices on ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, so as I mentioned, right through this week with free agency coming right up over the next few days, we're going to have a bunch of podcasts. I'm traveling back to Australia basically right over the free agency period, so I'm not sure whether the airplane Wi-Fi is going to be strong enough for me to be able to get some podcasts done, but we'll get some content out. There's no doubt about that, because it's going to be a busy time and an interesting period for the Bucks. We'll talk about some of those names on the next show as well as we continue to roll on this week on Locked On Bucks. But if we think about memories of Giannis, I'm sure, again, he talked about the title, the closeout game. What do you think of when you think about those younger years of Giannis? I've told this story a number of times on this show, but perhaps people are joining for the first time or they haven't heard this. But my first ever trip to Milwaukee was in 2015 for the playoffs, the Bucks and the Bulls. And I thought the way that series was going, if you forget, the Bulls had a comfortable lead in the series. The Bucks come back, huge win in Game 5 on the road, coming back to Milwaukee for Game 6. I was certain that this was going to a Game 7. So much so that I canceled my flight and extended my trip just before this Game 6, thinking that I got to go down the road to Game 7. I was fired up. The Bucks ended up losing by 1,000,000 points. Giannis gets ejected for steamrolling now GM of the Warriors, Mike Dunleavy. But I remember walking away from that, and clearly I would have loved the Bucks to have win that game. I would have loved Giannis to spend more than 10 minutes on the floor or whatever he did before he got ejected. But he did that to Dunleavy because he was looking after a player that was older than him in Michael Carter-Williams that just kept on getting hit from Dunleavy right throughout this series. And I remember just walking away from that going, look, that might not be the ideal situation. He's a young guy. But there was something so admirable about, again, the loyalty, the wanting to be a good teammate, and again, looking after the guys that are in the same locker room. And I think we've seen that throughout his career, whether it was a relationship that he's formed with Chris Middleton, the coaches that he's had along the way that we know that he's had a close connection to as well. So from a human level, we see what Giannis does on the floor as a player. But all these things along the way have been so endearing to me, and is why he is so easy to love as an athlete.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when you bring up the memories of Giannis from the early years, that game stands out, I think, to a lot of Bucks fans for the reason that the obvious of his body check on Mike Dunleavy, but to the points that you made of kind of like that quiet leadership, as funny as it is to say, man, that's being a leader for getting ejected for a flagrant 2. But again, as you pointed out, Michael Carter-Williams, maybe not a vet, but in the league longer than Giannis, and Giannis still that teammate that was looking out for him and saying, okay, I'm taking this into my own hands. But there was a couple of things from the first couple of years that really stood out to me, that game and how it kind of carried into the following year, where of course he had that 1-game suspension to start the season. But the first game of that following season, and that was actually the first broadcast that I had with the team in the 15-16 season, was my first year with the Bucks. And there was an immense amount of expectations of, man, this is, Giannis, he's really starting to develop here. And now he's going to develop into an all-star. When you first started to get those types of feelings early in that 15-16 season. He served the 1-game suspension and then played in the home opener against the Wizards, where it was either 30 or very close to 30 points that he scored in his first game of the season. And that's when you started to kind of see the wheels be put in motion. And that carried on throughout that season, where the following year he was named to the All-Star team for the first time in a trend that doesn't appear it's going to end anytime soon. That was kind of the start for me. And then the launching point of, this guy is going to be really special. I've talked about it a couple of times on this show and on other shows. But it was, I believe, the 17-18 season. I should have prepared better and pulled up the schedule. But it was the 17-18 season where their second home game that season was against the Portland Trail Blazers. It was a Saturday night. I remember everything about the game very vividly to this day, and that really felt like that game was Giannis's coming out party. Is not only is this guy an all-star, this guy is next level, and he is going to be a superstar. He scored 44 points. He basically single-handedly won the game for the Bucks, bringing them back from behind in the final minute of the game with the go-ahead dunk and with a defensive play on the other end as well that led to that dunk. That was the singular moment for me, where you had started to see in the previous few years getting better, becoming an all-star, and you felt like, all right, we have a good player. But that game for me was he is great, and he is potentially going to be one of the 10 best in this league.
All right, let us know in the YouTube comments or on Twitter, wherever is easiest for you to do so. What are some of your great memories of what Giannis has been able to do so far in his career? And just to follow on from that quickly, one thing that I do want to mention, because it was always something I remembered, was the Bucks at that point in time. So go 2016, 17, 18, starting to build a little bit, but they were still a kind of middle of the pack team, perhaps somewhat frustratingly and disappointingly if you were a Bucks fan at the time. But the one thing that Giannis always did that always made me think that, okay, once he gets to 25, 26, 27, there is going to be a time where he completely takes over the game, was that every time they're on national TV, particularly when they played LeBron, he had some of his best games of the season going head-to-head with LeBron. Now, the Bucks didn't always win those games against those Cavs teams, but they certainly did a few times. And a lot of the time it was because Giannis just went absolutely crazy. And I think we've seen that throughout his career in the biggest games is normally when he plays at his best, which always told me that he was going to be pretty special as we continued to watch him grow. But next I want to get to the evolution, because you did point to that. So what's next for Giannis? Because I think whether it is the leadership stuff, the way he talks about the game, and also probably the impatience and wanting to win, I think it's fascinating to know what's next, particularly with the way this franchise is right now. So we'll get to that coming up next. All right, so the question of what's next for Giannis may be a question that brings some anxiety for Bucks fans. I'm not 100% sure. Still a couple of years on this deal, but we've spent a lot of time in this offseason asking what the Bucks are going to do with the limited assets, with the position the franchise is in, with the salary cap, all those types of things. If I just straight up asked you, what is next for Giannis? And this doesn't have to be from a team perspective, but I think it's a fascinating question, because we've seen the way that he describes the game of basketball, losing, the way that he appears in front of the media. It has changed a lot. But then we've also seen this offseason that, seemingly from all the reporting we've read, that he was heavily involved in the coaching search. That in the past, going back to the Drew Holiday trade, he did get involved in certain players that he might want to play with or not play with. So given where the Bucks are at, and the desire and the need to continue putting a winner around this franchise superstar. What do you think is next? Because I think we're entering a fascinating period.
It is. It is the fascinating is a good way to put it, where this is kind of the period we've seen with a lot of superstars where you have that, I don't want to say honeymoon, but you have that early period where, Giannis at this point is Teflon with his organization, and rightfully so, that he brought home only the second championship in league history or in franchise history. And just again, like the ultimate lottery ticket, and how he put in the work and got better each and every season. And in all honesty, saved this franchise. Like, that is the larger discussion to have, centered around Giannis, that, the sale of the team played a big role in it, in the money that you were able to influx here and get that new arena and the development of Deer District. And Herb Cole as well, for as maligned as he was at times for his ownership, making sure who I sell this to is going to keep this team in Milwaukee. Those are all huge parts of it. But there isn't that interest, and there isn't that interest in keeping this team in this state and city if Giannis isn't developing like he is. And that was really around that period where those talks were starting to intensify of, are the Bucks a long-term fit here in Milwaukee? So he deserves a massive amount of credit as well for not only keeping the Bucks here, but making them relevant in not just Milwaukee, the state of Wisconsin. I've talked about before that I went to college up north in La Crosse. I've lived in Madison. I've been all around the state. And for the longest time, you would not see any Bucks apparel or any Bucks interest really outside of Milwaukee, in the area a little south to there, a little bit in Madison. But once you got outside of that range, nobody cared. It was the Brewers, it was the Packers, it was the Badgers, or it was teams in other states. And now that's not the case. That, wherever I go, I see Bucks hats and T-shirts, and you see people interested in this team. Giannis is the biggest reason why we've seen that change. So what's next for him? It's really to the point where he is basically now, it's kind of a lot to heap on him, but he is the steward of the franchise. And he is the guy that everything kind of runs through, as you mentioned, his involvement in the coaching search. But he's going to go down as the face of this franchise, which is absolutely insane for a franchise that had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, when you could argue that was peak Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as Lou Alcindor. Giannis is going to be the face of the franchise for likely forever, until somebody else like Giannis comes in. And it took 50 years to get that. So he's basically in that role of, he's a steward of this franchise. Everything goes past him. And now it's, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but it's in that spot where I kind of alluded to before. You see this with players of Giannis's level. And you mentioned the Cavaliers and him going head to head with LeBron. It's like that with Cleveland, where you had this generational talent fall to you. And in the case of the Bucks, for the 15th pick, and it changed your franchise's fortunes. It turned everything around. It made you relevant. And now it's just, hey, what can we do to make sure that you stay here? So for Giannis, the development is everything we've touched on before. In, some of the things that I don't want to say harped on, but we've continued to bring up, hey, it would be great if that Dirk Nowitzki owed to him, that one-legged turnaround, if that develops, if the baby hook, the one-handed hook push jump shot that Frank has dissected quite a bit, if that develops, but something away from just, I don't want to play into the stereotype, but the run and dunk guy that he's viewed by some as, that's the big thing for Giannis, is to develop that. But it's this partnership that, you trust Giannis is going to continue to work on those types of things. And in turn, he trusts that you're going to do everything you can to continue to make this franchise relevant, because he laid the groundwork and he put in those hours and he got you to that level. And now the partnership is, okay, I took us here. You need to keep us here.
Yeah, totally agree. And that's why when we talk about the salary situation the Bucks are in, and we always say it on the show, but it's not for the fans to care about the money. But Giannis has done everything for this franchise in terms of building the value of the franchise itself, the new arena and the fans that come. And you pointed to the apparel that people wear. I mean, I've noticed that in the 3 years since I've been here, even back then when they were winning, they hadn't won the title up to 2020, but they had the best team in the NBA from a record perspective. But you still didn't see anywhere near the Bucks gear that I have over the last week or so since I've been here walking the streets, and it's in the dead of the off season. If you thought you didn't see Bucks gear in the past, you definitely didn't see it in July. And so I'm still seeing it every single day. I've seen more Bucks stuff than I've seen Packers stuff, which, whatever, maybe that's just my experience, but it is certainly changed a lot. And, you can put whatever percentage you want, but I'd say a lot of it. But it's 7-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA, 5-time All-Defense, 2-time MVP. We already mentioned the All-Star MVP as well, a 75th anniversary team member, even though he'd only been in the league for 8 years. So all those types of things, I sit back and we've said, look, I don't know what the future holds, but I totally agree with you. There is a responsibility that he deserves the franchise to do whatever they can to ensure the team is as strong as it can be, to spend the money that they need to spend to keep them contending. Because Giannis has already done so much that if it doesn't pan out the Dirk way where he stays at one franchise forever, I would hope that there would be no Bucks fans that would hold anything against Giannis, because if you're talking about a guy that has completely emptied the tank for the franchise and for the city, it's him in every single time that he's gone out on the floor. So we could talk forever, Justin, and I don't know if you've got any final thoughts, but I look forward to hearing from Bucks fans and their thoughts about Giannis as well, because not only the fun basketball we've got to watch that I never thought I would watch with this team, this podcast, let's be honest, with the team playing so well, people tune in because they want to hear people talk about Giannis. They want to hear about this Bucks team. So again, we personally, certainly me personally, very thankful to everything he's done as well.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is obviously the caveat is, well, Giannis won a title and this other player did not. But I think the comparison would be what we potentially see happening here in the next couple of weeks or months with Damian Lillard. I think regardless, and we're obviously not projecting this or hoping for it, but let's just say Giannis doesn't play his entire career with the Bucks. I do think he would still be received very highly, and you would have even potentially Bucks fans saying, you know what, I'm a Bucks fan, but I support Giannis, and I'm going to have an investment in wherever he goes as well. The similarities between he and Dame are very interesting as well, that if Damian Lillard is traded, and again, he didn't win a title in Portland, but I'm going to be very curious to see everything that goes into that, and if he does move on, how he's viewed and treated by those Blazers fans.
Yeah, both guys been in the same city for a hell of a long time. As you pointed to, the Bucks obviously got to the top, which we absolutely love. But it's going to be fascinating. I'm sure we'll talk more about Damian Lillard over the next few weeks, or next week anyway, certainly on Locked On Bucks. So we'll leave it there. As I said, we could talk about Giannis forever, and I'm sure we're going to do it again later this week or whatever the Bucks do with this free agency as well. So we appreciate everyone tuning in today. 10 years, huh? Kind of makes me sad. We spoke about all these babyface Giannis moments. Now he's got the haircut back from the earlier years, but he's approaching 30, which is makes me a little bit sad. I wish we could go through those young Giannis era and years again, but hopefully still plenty of success to come for the Giannis-led Milwaukee Bucks. But tomorrow on the show, or the next episode on the show, we're actually doing it right now, he's going to be talking about Brook Lopez a little bit more and some of the names that have been linked to the Bucks. Yes, we're going to mention Derrick Rose again for about the 15th time on this podcast, but we're going to get to that. So make sure you tune in, subscribe, drop a like, comment, all those things. It's free to do. We really appreciate it. And as I said, let us know all your Giannis memories and thoughts on what's going to happen next, and we'll speak to you all next time.